The Alabama Crimson Tide defeated the Ohio State Buckeyes by a score of 52-24 on Monday night. It was a game that on Monday I said, well, if these two teams were completely healthy, and by these two teams, I'm speaking more on the Ohio State side because Ohio State, by the time kickoff happened, had 13 players that were inactive, and multiple starters on the defense ended up getting scratched from the lineup at the very last minute. So I felt like if Ohio State was much healthier, they would have been able to contend with Alabama much more. But as we saw as the game unfolded, this Alabama Crimson Tide team might have been the best team that Nick Saban has ever had, especially on the offensive side of the ball. And really, from the point where the Ohio State Buckeyes had their first three and out, it happened sometime in the second quarter, I believe. By the time that first three and out happened, that was all Alabama needed to kind of just ride away with this game. It felt like Ohio State really had no answers, and I kind of thought like it was going to be that going in, that as much as Ohio State tried, as much as the Buckeyes were going to continue to fight, which is a character trait of this team, especially exemplified by their quarterback Justin Fields. As a character trait, the Ohio State Buckeyes were fighters. They were very determined, very persevering team. And as much as they were able to do that throughout the regular season and into the college football playoff, I didn't think that they were going to be able to completely keep up with the Alabama Crimson Tide. And that's exactly what ended up happening. It was a back and forth competitive game up until that 1-3 and out by the Buckeyes, and that allowed Alabama to go down and score and go up by 2 touchdowns. And then it was 35-14 by the half, and the game was pretty much over at that point. Ohio State did have a really good drive to open the second half, but that was about it. You just could not stop that Alabama offense. But when you have a team like Ohio State that is down not three, when you have a team like Ohio State that is down 13 players to start the game, and you lose Trey Sermon on his first carry of the game, he goes out with an injury. There is not really much that you would have been able to do to be able to keep up with an offense like this Alabama Crimson Tide team had this year. Ohio State, in the end, I think the storyline should be is that Ohio State was just too banged up to keep up with Alabama. They would have had a hard time doing it anyways, as we've been discussing, but it was just over. It was over by halftime. You could feel that there was nothing that Justin Fields and the Ohio State Buckeyes, especially on the defensive end, there was nothing that they had left in the tank. To be able to compete with this team. And of course, Justin Fields playing with a hip pointer. He played as well as he should with an injury like that. He didn't turn the ball over. I believe there was actually a fumble that was overturned. Not his fault though. He didn't throw any interceptions. He did what you should do as a quarterback when you're not 100%, and that's mostly game manage. That's let your stars. That's let your running back Trey Sermon. Of course, the game plan would have been, if he did not get hurt, run the ball. Chris Olave on the outside of the wide receiver core, let him make some plays. Justin Fields did about as he could. So if there's anybody out there that's knocking Justin Fields for his performance in the national championship, just don't. There's not really much that he could have done, especially against that Alabama defensive line, which is perennially good. Barrymore's going to be a fantastic pro defensive tackle, probably going, in my mind, in the late first round. But obviously the star of this national championship game was DeVonta Smith, and he only needed 2 quarters to do it. 215 receiving yards in the first half. At one point, he had more receiving yards than the Buckeyes had total offense, and that's just mind-blowing. I mean, this kid is something special. I don't know of a receiver talent that was this dominant in a big game like this in so long. I mean, Jamar Chase and LSU wide receiver core had a great game last year against the Clemson Tigers, but DeVonta Smith is something else of a talent. He is just so good, and part of it I feel like was the Ohio State defensive game plan, which was horrible. I don't understand why they were giving DeVonta Smith. They were playing DeVonta Smith back about 15 yards I understand you don't want to give up the big play to Alabama, but in the effort of trying to compete against that big play, they allowed DeVonta Smith to get 15 to 20 yards in chunks nearly every single play. And I'm sitting there on my couch watching this game like, how the hell is this guy continuing to be this wide open? We know how good DeVonta Smith is, and it feels like Ohio State knew, or at least they should have known how good DeVonta Smith was, and it wasn't until late in the second quarter that they actually decided to try and cover the damn guy. It was absolutely incredible to me. Again, 215 yards on 12 receptions, 3 touchdowns, averaging 18 yards per catch. Just an unreal performance. If there was any doubt about who should have won the Heisman Trophy, I think this nips it in the bud, puts it away. Of course, the other big man on campus, Mac Jones. Let me read you the stat line here: 36 for 45, 464 passing yards, 5 touchdowns. Now, if this doesn't balloon Mac Jones' draft stock, I don't know what will. I think he's a for sure first rounder at this point. I would actually really like the Pittsburgh Steelers to take a look at Mac Jones and drafting him in their draft slot. I believe they're about 25, 26 if my memory serves correctly. And if you take a look at the attributes of Mac Jones, he's very, very similar to Ben Roethlisberger. So if you're not trying to go for a complete regime change, which Mike Tomlin and Ben Roethlisberger have been running the Steelers offense for close to 10 years now, long time, over 10 years actually. I think, Mike Tomlin's in his 16th season, something absolutely ridiculous. If you take a look at Mac Jones, not really a scrambler. He's got great decision making, a very good arm. He could absolutely fit the mold that the Steelers have and have had for multiple years now. I think that's a pick that they should explore. But Mac Jones, for somebody that was in a QB competition at the beginning of the season with Bryce Young, who is also supposed to be very good, I was really happy for Mac Jones to have the game that he did. I think he's a good quarterback. He's not going to be as good as like a Zach Wilson or a Justin Fields. I think at the next level at first, I think he needs to explore and diversify his game a little bit, probably slim down a little bit, maybe work on upping that 40 time. But as a product of work, I was extremely impressed with Mac Jones, as I was extremely impressed with DeVonta Smith. I think if the Dolphins don't take him at number 3, it's going to be a mistake. It was funny, actually. My father messaged me last night saying, boy, DeVonta Smith would look really good in a Dolphins uniform, and it's hard to disagree. I think if you take the chance, you reunite with DeVonta Smith, it would be really beneficial, especially for quarterback wide receiver chemistry. And, I know we alluded to this at some point in Monday's show, but a lot of people not really happy with Tua's first year. And I'm saying, well, look, it takes so long for a quarterback on a wide receiver core to get on the same page, especially when you have not played the first half of the year, the first 6 games, and you also have not played the preseason. I mean, even Tom Brady, the greatest quarterback of all time, was looking kind of for most of this season while he got on page with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers wide receiver core. Now that they're somewhat on page, their offense is looking much better. Imagine how much better Tua Tagovailoa is going to look with a wide receiver like DeVonta Smith. Now, Devontae Parker, also a pretty good wide receiver. I think he's got dropping issues. He's got inconsistency issues. He is the player that the Miami Dolphins had to pay. I feel like they had to pay him to keep him. He's probably their best offensive weapon besides Mike Gesicki, who Mike Gesicki is only really decent. I mean, you take a look at his route running, and he looks like a 18-wheeler bumbling down a highway. He doesn't really try to break off the ball. He's just kind of a big target when you need one. So DeVonta Smith could look really good in a Dolphins uniform. I think it would be a mistake if they don't draft him. The only other person that I would draft in his spot is the left tackle from Oregon. But I think the Jets, if they are comfortable with Darnold, they are going to probably draft the left tackle Selway. If I'm pronouncing that or Penei Sewell. That's how you pronounce it. But we're kind of getting on a rabbit trail here. There's going to be plenty of time to talk about who's going to be drafting who over the next couple of months. Really, really impressed with Alabama. I would go on record saying that's the best team that Nick Saban has ever had, and if there's any question about it being an Alabama Crimson Tide dynasty, I think this solidifies it. I think Saban solidifies himself as the best college coach of all time, or at least number two. I mean, there's probably no debate at this point. You know what? I'm gonna stick to it, own up to it. Nick Saban's the best college coach of all time. That's just my hard-headed opinion, but roll credits. But extremely impressed with Alabama in the national title game. Again, not really much Ohio State could do to keep up, and that's not necessarily their fault when you're down 13 players. A lot of them on the defensive end. It looked like the Ohio State Buckeyes defense was just getting run around. And again, as I said earlier in the segment, a lot of that I felt was the defensive game plan against the Alabama wide receiver core. They were giving them way too much space, and I don't understand why. I mean, I understand the thought you don't want to give up the big play. Don't give up big plays to Bama, but that only works if you're also not giving up chunk yardage to the receivers every single time Mac Jones stepped back to pass. There's a reason that he had close to 500 yards passing, and that was pretty much the reason why, is that Ohio State defensive backs were giving the Alabama wide receiver core far too much space. I'm excited to see what Alabama does next year. They're going to have a lot of returning talent, especially on the defensive end. But obviously losing a lot of pieces. But, this college football playoff was, in all, it was a little disappointing in terms of the quality of games. And I think that if you're looking for a reason to move on, you're looking for a reason to revamp the college football playoff system, I think you take a look at this year and you say, yeah, we probably could have used more teams, even though Alabama was just leaps and bounds ahead of everybody else. I think you look at it and you say, yeah, we could probably use some more teams just in case a team pulls off a miraculous upset. A Texas A&M comes out of nowhere, plays the game of their lives, and beats a team like Alabama. At this point, we're just dreaming about what ifs, ands, and buts. Very impressed with Alabama. Feel bad for Ohio State. They never really had a chance in this game, but because of their injuries, how could you keep up with an offense that you would have had to play really well against to keep up with anyways? Hey everyone, thank you so much for watching that segment of the Hard Headed Sports Podcast. If you're interested in watching more of these segments coming out every Monday, Wednesday, Friday, and Saturday as the show does, you should click subscribe to the Hard Headed Sports YouTube channel. And if you're interested in listening to the entire Hard Headed Sports Podcast in full, links in the descriptions to the Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and Google Podcasts, available on all those platforms. Thank you so much for listening, watching, and I will see you very soon.